What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hellbound Garage. Today I have to do a bunch of maintenance on this guy here, so I figured this would be the perfect opportunity to go into a full overview of my 2003 Toyota Tundra. This truck I bought 2 years ago at this point, and believe it or not, it came to me almost 98% stock. Let's say 98%. The only thing done by previous owners was it had a commercial lift gate, because this was a company vehicle before the guy that I bought it from. So this was used for a car wash to haul chemicals back and forth. So unfortunately there's some issues, but overall it's in really good shape. The truck has 242,000 miles on it right now, and for the most part, it's still all original OE parts. The parts that have been changed on the truck are the steering rack, which is a big thing for these trucks, and lower ball joints. Lower ball joints are absolutely terrible with these. Like, the #1 maintenance thing you do on these is check your ball joints, like every oil change, because they have such a terrible tendency to fall apart. And when they fall apart, the truck literally slams to the ground because of how the ball joint is designed. So I've got some things in the future works to get rid of any possibility of that being an issue, but for the time being I just check them every time I take the tires off of the truck. So past that, past the ball joints and the steering rack, the timing belt was done by a previous owner. I still have roughly 10,000 miles on it before it needs to be done again, which I'm thankful for, even though it's one of those things I know how to do pretty easy. I just pulled the original spark plugs from this motor, 242,000 miles, and I pulled the original spark plugs out of the cylinder heads. They were bad, they were corroded in there, they were terrible. It was not a good couple of days. I thought I was going to end up essentially stripping the heads and having to do a complete teardown of the motor. But anyways, that's all good there. And then the last thing mechanically that's done with this vehicle is this guy right here. You see that knob? Yeah, this truck has manual 4-wheel drive. This truck originally comes with, right there, push button 4-wheel drive, but has been switched over to manual 4-wheel drive. And the reason for that is when I bought the truck, I knew it had a 4-wheel drive issue. I was like, cool, I've done some research, looks like it's a solenoid on the front differential. Solid. But I got the worst of the two options when it comes to the 4-wheel drive failing, and that was the solenoid on the transfer case. Now, solenoid on the transfer case literally goes through the entire transfer case, so you either way you're looking at pretty much buying a new transfer case if that solenoid goes bad at about $900. Well, doing some research, I found out that certain Tacoma cases will mate to the transmission in the Tundra with absolutely zero modifications besides cutting a hole in your floor. So that's what I did. I cut a hole in my floor, put a Tacoma transfer case on it, and then made a custom shifter so it would pop up in the right location, because had I left the shifter location where it was at factory, it'd be coming through the center console in the pocket area, and I just didn't want to deal with that. So I made the custom shifter and just had it pop through where it was nice and easily accessible. When you do the manual transfer case swap, the other thing that you have to do is you have to lock the front diff so that way it's always spinning, because Tundra, or Toyota, in all of their infinite knowledge, when the push button 4-wheel drive isn't activated, a solenoid on the front diff disconnects the front diff, so the axles inside of it don't spin. Super awesome idea. It'll probably get you better gas mileage. But when you do a manual transfer case swap with a stock axle, you have to lock that, which is easy enough. You pull the front solenoid out, you take a worm clamp after you slide the collar that controls that inside the diff, you slide the collar over to the lock position, and then you put the worm clamp or the C-clamp or whatever you want to call it, hose clamp, around the that part of the axle. That way it essentially locks the diff in four-wheel drive all the time. And then you put the actuator back in place and you're good to go. Now the other modifications to the truck, as you can tell, the big one that always gets pointed out is this front bumper. Now this is a front bumper that I custom built. I literally hacked off the frame rails as far back as I possibly could, because there is a 12,000 pound winch in the front of this, so I wanted all that as far back as possible. That way the weight was not as affected of having all this over the springs. So you know, it's just a weight distribution deal. So that, and if I ever actually take this off-road, which is a plan, I have more departure and I just have better angles in general. So this is my custom bumper. It does have some Amazon lights. Side note, any of the Tundras, they have very specific lighting, and I found this out the hard way. They have to sense a 12-volt signal through the fog lights for the fog lights to work properly. I have these all wired up. They're supposed to work with the switch and be perfect, but because of the way that the electronics are set up in the Tundra, if you turn on your fog lights and it doesn't sense the 12 volts, it turns on the high beams for your headlights. So that's a nifty little fact I didn't know about. So at some point I need to go through and chase it, but I've also had these on here for a year and a half plus, and I haven't done anything about it because I haven't needed them. So that is one thing that is on the list, but still looks really awesome. Get compliments about it all the time. Now, I am very much a function over form guy, so for me, a set of steel wheels is way better than aluminum. So we've got some nice, just black steel wheels, and then I went and put 33-inch Milestar, Patagonia tires on the truck. These are phenomenal tires. So far I haven't really seen any of it, too much of an issue. The one thing that has been kind of weird is when it's rainy outside. These don't necessarily like rain all that much, and that's because they've got a pretty knobby pattern on them. So that's the one downside to this. Now, don't listen to the internet. These are a perfect case of not to listen to the internet, because the internet's not always right. I wanted bigger tires, and 32s that were on my Xterra that I had previously, I actually put on this truck because it had the same bolt pattern, and they still look kind of small. They didn't rub or anything like that, so I was like, oh, I can go up to a 33. Well, not sure if you're going to be able to tell, but this right here, there's a little bit of chunking on the edge, and that's because, well, it rubs in there. I have to take a hammer to that at some point because I've ground off as much as I can, and the tire still rubs, so it chunks a little bit. I've learned to drive around it, so it really doesn't bug me that much anymore, and it wouldn't be a problem if I get in there and do the like 2-inch leveling kit for the Tundra. But what they don't tell you about the Tundra is, in order to do the leveling kit that a lot of vehicles can do stock or with just a puck, the Tundra, even with just a leveling kit, you need new control arms for it. It really sucks. I don't like it, and I bought the leveling kit for it, but it doesn't fit. And I wouldn't have the whole tire rubbing issue if that kit would fit. So it kind of sucks, but like I said, I've learned to drive around it. The other thing with these tires, I didn't do enough research on the rims. So I actually have I think it's a 1-inch spacer. It's a spacer with studs, so instead of the 6 lugs that are on this, there's actually 12 lugs on each wheel. And that's to bring the rim out enough that it clears the brake caliper. Didn't really realize that that was a thing until I went to go put them on, because like I said, with the Xterra rims and tires that I put on here, that wasn't an issue. So the spacers are actually from the Xterra when I sold the Xterra, so people didn't have to deal with the maintenance aspect of spacers. I took those spacers off and put them on the truck, so I didn't have to spend any extra money, and I decreased the amount of maintenance for the Xterra for whoever now owns it, because every time I do maintenance on like oil change or anything, I pop all 6 rims off, or all 6 tires, or not 6 tires, geez, all 4 tires off of the truck and retighten the spacer lugs that are behind it. So just one of those things. And one of the things a lot of people also notice about this truck is going to be my spare tire holder and my bumper. Now, I don't like spending a lot of money on something that I could possibly build myself, which is why I did the front bumper the way that I did. And I've always liked the tire gates that are available for certain vehicles. This Tundra wasn't available for, at least through the companies that I could find, there wasn't one of these available. And I had leftover roll cage tubing from the Datsun, so I decided I wanted to build my own tire gate. So it's a pre-runner Baja style deal. I designed it so that there are these 4 pins on it, and you should be able to completely flip this so that way the tire is facing outwards. And I actually tested that, because if I need room in this truck, I just simply pull these 4 pins and completely remove this, just because it's still easier than trying to flip it just for whatever case it may be. But it's still cool because I can pull 2 of these pins and have this slide out or swing out, and it gives me all the space. That way I don't have to try and lift stuff over top of the bed. So super cool. I'm actually pretty happy about it. I would redo some things about it if I had the time. There's the bracket that's behind the license plate that holds, because the frame on the outside is actually 2 pieces. There's a bracket in the center that holds it all together. I would redo that because it's a little too tight, so that's an issue. And the pinholes themselves, because they run through a bottom and top bracket through this bushing, the holes are a little tight, so it makes it a royal pain to get these pins pulled if it's been a while since they have been pulled. But at the same time, you don't get any shaking, wobbling, banging around because they are so tight. So it's a 50-50 on that one. And then past that, we have the tube style bumper. There's another one that I just had leftover roll cage tubing and decided to go with it. I had built a previous tube style bumper for the Xterra out of square tubing, and that was a nightmare. Where this round tubing, this DOM, if you get the angles right, this is way easier to build bumpers out of than square tubing, especially when you got angles and stuff. You know, you can just bend this instead of having to cut an angle and weld square tubing. So overall, super happy with this whole layout on here. But this is also going to go away in the future. and that's because of this problem. So if you can't tell, right about there's a big rust hole. You can't tell very much because of the existing bed liner, but let's see, will it work? Can you see this on camera? Probably not. There's not a whole lot left of this bed. Like I said, this was used to haul chemicals for a car wash, and those chemicals did a number on the bed between the forklift that loaded them and the chemicals that naturally would spill out of the containers in the bed of the truck. So I do have material and a plan for the bed, but it's one of those things that I need to get to a certain point on the Datsun before I can take this bed off, because this is going to be a time-consuming project. But it'll be well worth it afterwards. Last couple little tidbits. Because this is a Access Cab SR5 Tundra, it also has the 2UZ V8 instead of the V6 and an automatic transmission. So this is a quote-unquote legendary motor. It's a 1,000,000-mile motor if you take care of it, but most people don't take care of them, still beat the heck out of them, and still see crazy mileage out of them. Like this one, I mean, original spark plugs, 242,000 miles, and didn't skip a beat. But as you can see, it is pretty much all stock, minus the cover for the top that's sitting in my garage. And if you were curious about the winch, there's the winch there. Now, I actually have the controls for this in the corner right there. I took cables and extended everything. That's why you see the red line. And if you were to look down there, you'll see more power cable. Because once again, I wanted this as close as possible to the front of the truck. So I remote mounted the controls, and turned out really well. So there's that. Well, there you have it. That is a full overview of the Tundra and a couple of hints of what are to come in the future. So until next time.